Welcome to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. It's like coffee with an analyst, but there's no actual coffee. Each episode, we interviewed an expert in the field of law enforcement analysis to share their career-defining stories and to get their insights on the world. Please join us on recognizing and learning from these brilliant minds as we define the law enforcement analysis profession one episode at a time.
Thank you for joining me. I hope many aspects of your life are progressing. My name is Jason Elder, and today our guest has 6 years of experience as a law enforcement analyst. A law enforcement analyst with experience in 3 different locations: Frederick PD in Maryland, Lakewood PD in Colorado, and currently in Jefferson County Sheriff's Office in Colorado. She's an Oregon native, she's a traveler, a camper, hiker, and even a hockey fan. Please welcome Danielle Giraud. Danielle, how are we doing?
Doing well. How are you today?
I am doing well. I want to get into the 3 different stops that you've had in your career. Let's go back in time. Let's talk about how you go from Oregon to being in Frederick, Maryland.
So I went to school in Oregon. I went to Western Oregon University, where I got my Bachelor's of Science degree in criminal justice and a minor in computer science, and also was given a certificate in crime analysis. I got into this field thanks in part to my professors. My first professor, Professor Terry Gendrich, noticed immediately while I was in his classes in criminal justice that I had this ability to constantly question everything going on. I was always inquisitive. I was always needing more information, being outspoken. And so he encouraged me to look into crime analysis, and I immediately fell in love with my courses. My courses while at Western Oregon University were taught by Christopher Bruce, which was so beneficial in so many different ways. It was fabulous to have an opportunity academically to get that knowledge base for crime analysis and be taught by somebody who was a living, breathing crime analyst who got to say, okay, yeah, this is what it's like academically, but this is the real world approach to it. So both those professors really, truly impacted my life. And then just as I was about ready to graduate, I started looking for jobs. At this time, it was in 2014. So the economy was kind of sort of coming out of the recession, but nowhere in Oregon was hiring a fresh-faced kid graduating from college in crime analysis. So I took the first opportunity that I could that worked out for myself and moved to Frederick, Maryland.
What are the first tasks that you had to do? Because you were part of the Safe Streets grants. So talk a little bit about the Safe Street grant and the tasks that you initially were responsible for doing.
So the Safe Streets grant was designed to assist the Frederick Police Department with identifying potential candidates who were more prone to recidivism and or victims that were prone to continuous victimology, if you will. Mm-hmm. So I studied, researched, and became thoroughly involved in all sorts of investigations related to gang members, suspicious activities. Robberies in particular were my specialty, as well was indecent exposures, which happened quite a bit in that small town, believe it or not. Moderately small town. It's, I think, 85,000 people. And I also worked very closely with the parole and probation division. And what the program did was it had a series of a scale, if you will, and each candidate was given an opportunity to meet with their parole or their probation officer, and they kind of outlined their criminal history, their likelihood of committing another crime again, and then also offered opportunities and resources to help them be successful. They get them lined up with jobs, find them housing, and so forth. But they were watched more carefully. They were given stricter rules to follow, and my job was to make sure that I communicated between both the police department and parole and probation division. any people that weren't following along with the rules. I helped out with major crime investigations like homicides and aggravated assaults, like I said, robberies, motor vehicle theft.
So in terms of the victims, to get onto your list, do they also have to be offenders as well? Or what programs did you have that were dedicated to just the victims and helping them not be victims if they were repetitive victims?
Sure. So it was more along the lines of victims being victims again and again by the repeat offenders. So while we were serving the repeat offenders, we were also trying to give resources to the victims so that they wouldn't necessarily fall into the same situation again. We'd give them resources for health options, housing options, food, education, and anything like that. They weren't necessarily also committing the crime all the time, but they could also be victim and offender depending on the crimes committed.
So was there a threshold involved, or how did someone become part of this Safe Streets initiative?
Yes, there was a threshold that was involved. Like I said, the grant has changed significantly since then, so I am uncomfortable speaking to full detail about what it is now or what it was then, because programs change over time. But it did have a sliding scale. It looked at age of first offense, whether or not they were self-identified as a gang member, affiliated with any gang members, the types of crime committed, how frequently they were committed, and so forth.
So then what were you doing specifically? What were some of your tasks that you were in charge of to support this program?
I focused a great deal of my everyday activity in working closely with current investigations, as well as researching previous investigations in order to offer the best comprehensive background I could to an investigator in the chance that something did come up. Due to the small collection of individuals that were on this program while I was employed in Frederick, I knew a great deal about them, where they lived, where they worked. That information all came over from parole and probation. So it wasn't like I was digging into their personal lives, but I was aware of what they were doing, who they were hanging out with, and I was giving that information to the investigators in the off chance that something happened, a shooting, a stabbing, a homicide, so that they had that resource, that material available for them prematurely. So they weren't running around trying to gather all that information reactively. My job was to provide it proactively.
Did you have access to databases that were maybe beyond the norm of what maybe a typical law enforcement analyst might have? So beyond like CAD records or RMS data or criminal histories, did you have access to databases since you got into more in parole and to developing more information on resources? Did you have access to databases that were maybe beyond the norm?
I don't believe I did. Most analysts kind of get the same thing, their same basket, if you will. I utilized a program that is able to share information nationally. So there are millions and millions of records from law enforcement agencies all across the United States that have agreed to information exchange. So I used that network, which was incredibly beneficial because not every agency has an analyst, and it allows you to go and basically look in their CAD data or look in their case data for information. And then once you find that information, it also provides you a point of contact, which is fabulous because you end up having the ability to create these very beneficial networks. That program I used, but it seems as though that network is becoming more popular and it's an option available to a lot of analysts today. In regards to parole and probation, I only utilized my contacts over there. I never gained access to their software programs. I feel like it was beyond my reach. It wasn't my specialty. So I tried my very best and still try my very best not to poke around where I shouldn't belong.
Okay. You were a grant employee. So does that mean you were actually an employee of the police department, or did you have different roles for your employment while you were there?
I was a employee of the police department. Thankfully, the police department picked up my benefits, my retirements, holidays, vacation time, everything like that was provided by the police department.
I was part of some grants where you weren't part of the actual police department. I used to be an employee of the University of Maryland and actually stationed in Baltimore. So that's where I was going with that information, because there's just different roles. It's a different feel altogether in terms of being like a grant employee stationed at a police department. So that's where I was going with that. What's the story that you want to tell in terms of your time there at Frederick?
I had a wonderful time there. Everybody was fantastic. I grew so much professionally and personally. It was the first time I was away from my family. Being all the way across the United States, I only had my ex with me and our 2 dogs. So it was a very tight-knit department. We were very close. We were very involved at work. And I always felt like I was a part of the team. So that was a great opportunity for me to see the sisterhood, the brotherhood that exists within law enforcement agencies. Some of the more interesting, depressing, and kind of disgusting things I learned while working in Frederick, because I was an investigations analyst. I was afforded the opportunity to assist in homicides and aggravated incest case. We also had a air collision happen one afternoon. So being young and inexperienced, those were definitely learning opportunities, and I learned rather quickly. One of the more impactful investigations that I was loosely tied in involved a young juvenile who unfortunately passed away as a result of child abuse. Some pretty awful child abuse. As a result of that particular investigation and that case, Maryland ended up passing a new law in honor of that child that unfortunately died, in order to hopefully prevent that same type of situation from not occurring again. A wonderful opportunity to see how something so horrific and tragic can, in some ways, result in better opportunities for future individuals.
So what's the name of the law? Is it named after the child?
Yes, the law is called Anayah's Law.
What was specifically came out of that as a result of the case?
So it's my understanding that as a result of that law, basically what it does is it allows for a reevaluation of children who've been removed from parental custody and placed in foster care or adoption or with a guardian. It allows for reconsideration before the child is given right back to the biological parents.
Okay.
So kind of like a safety net. So if the parents or the guardian even is time and time again abusing the child, there's already cases or previous documentation of child abuse. Once that case is complete and the parent has gone through whatever necessary time served, re-education programs, and so forth, the child would then be given back to the parents if the parents wanted the child back. I believe the law allows for there to be reconsideration before the child is automatically given back to the parent.
Okay, so there was a long history of abuse in this situation, having the child being pulled out of the home, being given back to the parents in the home before, unfortunately, the abuse led to the death of the child.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's horrible. Okay.
Yeah.
This is obviously a sensitive topic. I guess, can you go into exactly what your role was in this case?
This one was kind of like within the first couple weeks on the job. So my involvement was more along the lines of, here's the type of case that you may or may not be involved in the future. So I just absorbed everything I could and provided any resource that I could. That could be criminal background histories on the individuals involved, any like social public social media queries I could find, any points of contact, names, anything and everything related to the individuals involved in the investigation. I tried to provide like a background packet for the investigators. Like I said, this happened relatively towards the beginning of my employment there, but as time went on, I became more heavily involved. For example, there was a shooting on the 4th of July that I was able to provide documentation to the department based off of the knowledge that I had gained in connection to my responsibilities to the Safe Streets grant, that I was able to go to the investigator, the sergeant, and the captains and commanders and say, hey guys, I know this person, we know that this person's involved, and here are all of the places and the people that he could go and hide out with. And sure enough, he was found with one of those people.
How did you know that he was involved with the homicide?
Because we had a fabulous description of him. He was a very noticeable individual, and he was already identified within the Safe Streets program. So we were already watching him very carefully. We knew that there was an ongoing feud between groups within Frederick. So him being at the top of the list of being watched over and hopefully and we were trying to guide him through changing his life. That's how we knew he was involved.
That's a great feeling, given information that leads to the conclusion of an investigation. So let's talk about something a little lighter. So talk a little bit about going from West Coast to East Coast a little bit, because you made that trek. As you mentioned before, it's your first time away from home, and there's a lot to learn on your own moving from West Coast to East Coast. So what was the kind of the surprising things you realized once you got to the East Coast, or even maybe specifically in Maryland?
How humid it was over there. One of the surprising things that I learned that I didn't even realize before moving to Maryland was Maryland is considered a southern state. It's actually south of the Mason-Dixon line. So when I learned that one day, I was completely blown away. Oregon, it's wet. Well, I grew up in the Willamette Valley. It is very wet and very green. We don't have really hot temperatures. It never really gets cold or rarely even snowed growing up. So I went from an environment like that to it's 95 degrees, the humidity is out of control. One of the things that I loved about being on the East Coast, however, was the history that exists on the East Coast as compared to the West Coast. So much more of our nation's founding members, ideas, theologies, and so forth came from the East Coast and then spread to the West Coast. So it was great to see the beginning, if you will.
Sure. And I do miss, now that I have kids, I really miss going to DC. And we would go there all the time when we lived in Baltimore. It was a nice day trip to go down there, look at all the monuments, go to the museums and whatnot. So to that point, I really miss that area and all the history that's around there.
I definitely went to the Smithsonian museums a few times. I think they're very cool.
So then what led you to leave Frederick to then go to Colorado?
So given that the position was grant funded, I didn't know whether or not the position would be there year to year. If the position was no longer funded through the governor's office, I didn't know if the department was going to pick up the position. So the uncertainty and being so far from my family kind of sort of started to weigh on my shoulders. I didn't think it would impact me as much as it did, but I did truly miss being closer to my family. And I'm not a fan of humidity. My hair just cannot even with it. So I looked elsewhere. I knew I wanted to come back to the West Coast. When I was a young child, I couldn't tell you when or where or why exactly, but I promised myself one day that I would live in Colorado. Okay. And I have no idea where that aspiration came from. So when I was looking to leave Maryland, I was trying to find a place that was close to home, but would have opportunities and maybe perhaps different fields outside of law enforcement. So whether it be in the private sector or public sector, but in a different manner or fashion. So that's when I found an opportunity with the Lakewood Police Department. So I left, I worked for Frederick, Maryland from about February 2014 to July 2015, at which point I moved to Lakewood.
So then once you get over to Lakewood, then where are you stationed in the police department? What tasks are you assigned to do?
It's a unique setup at Lakewood. When I was there, I don't know if it's changed since then, but I was a employee of the support services division, but housed with investigations and assisted investigations, as well as the patrol division. So my coworker and I work side by side next to investigators. Our jobs were kind of whatever we needed to do in that given time frame. We would make bulletins. We would do like a weekly crime report, what's going on, what's happening. We would help out in homicide investigations, missing person investigations. So it was kind of more like a renaissance opportunity. We got to do a little bit of everything. I did not do as much hands-on intelligence investigations analyst functions. I was more of like your stereotypical crime analyst.
What's your favorite case or project that you worked on there?
One of my favorite cases that I worked on while with Lakewood, I assisted with a homicide investigation. And it was unique because the homicide that occurred happened at a hotel along one of our really busy thoroughways here in the Denver metropolitan area. We had a victim, but we didn't have a name for him yet. So a portion of the beginning of the investigation was trying to identify this body. Once we identified him, we got this, the investigation continued on, and we discovered quickly that we didn't have a ton of witnesses or involved parties. Eventually, we got the name of a potential witness. Unfortunately, at the time, this particular witness was new to the Denver area. We were able to determine that because Metro-wide, we couldn't find any recent involvements with her. As a result, I utilized the LINK system, the great law enforcement information exchange that exists for large portions of the United States. I searched the witness's name in this system and come to find out she grew up down in Pueblo, Colorado. So using her information, we found a mother and a grandmother. We were able to send the investigators down and contact the family. We were able to get a new telephone number, an area where the witness was residing in the Denver metropolitan area, which was fantastic, as we were also able to work closely with Denver and their outreach programs to locate this witness. So she was a fantastic resource for the investigation ultimately, and it was a great opportunity to showcase how analysts never give up on a problem, how we're always willing to dig a little deeper and problem solve.
How did you identify the witness?
So the witness, I don't know how. Oftentimes what happened at Lakewood was we were stationed at our computers, which were outside of the conference room. So we would be given bits and pieces of information. So it was, hey, we have this name. Can you figure out how she may or may not be related? How can you get contact information for her? So the name, I don't know how it came up with. All I know was that it was given to me and we ran with it. I think ultimately my fondest memory of working with the Lakewood Police Department was working alongside Levi. He was a fantastic coworker. He became one of my best friends. We both parted ways after some time working for Lakewood. We still work in the Denver area, but I got to marry him last June, and it is the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Did you guys work on a case together or a project together, or is there something memorable in terms of the case that you worked on?
He was actually the crime analyst that was hired a couple months before I started. So he was on my interview panel. We got to know each other. He was incredibly helpful when I moved to the area, and we became incredibly fast friends. We had a tremendous amount in common. One of the things that I enjoyed about working with him, and even to this day, is we're able to communicate so well. Some days we would say a handful of words together. Some days we would spend all day talking. He is incredibly knowledgeable. He's got a ton of experience. So he was great at helping me problem solve in an environment in ways that I hadn't had to in Frederick. One of the more interesting cases I helped out with that kind of just like blew my mind in the sense of, I can't believe people do this. We had an individual that tried to sell marijuana illegally, even though you can buy it and sell it here in Colorado. It was a illegal operation, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And he was murdered for weed. And I just think that's so strange in a state that allows you to purchase and consume marijuana, that you could lose your life for selling it on the street. It was just, I don't know, people suck.
So what were the particulars of the investigation, and what was your role in the investigation?
So this particular investigation, I kind of played like helicopter. Once again, I was watching how it all unfolded. I believe I was out of town and or previously preoccupied. So when it happened, my husband or coworker at the time, Levi, was primary analyst to the investigation. So he was knowledgeable in how to analyze call or cell phone data. And he was able to recreate the activity of the suspects leading up to the homicide. So that was a new opportunity for me to see different pieces of technology and how it all kind of relates to an investigation.
You described your relationship, your friendship there with your future husband there. It kind of reminded me of Jim and Pam from The Office. So was there anything, did you start dating when you were there at Lakewood?
I don't know the Jim and Pam reference. I've never
Oh,
watched
you don't?
The Office.
Oh my goodness. Sorry about that.
I think I get where you're coming from.
Well, it's
we
like
were just
finishing
coworkers.
it's like finishing your other sentences. Sometimes you can just look at each other and know what the other one's thinking, and there's just a real rapport with one another. And in The Office, they had those two. One was a secretary, one was a salesman, and they were 10 feet away from each other, and they developed a relationship over time. So anyway, just to fill you in, but go ahead. Sorry.
Sure. So we were best friends, great friends. We'd worked together. He invited me to join his trivia league. So I started doing trivia with him and a couple of other individuals who I later became friends with. While I was with Lakewood, we were just coworkers. It wasn't until I'd left Lakewood in the fall of 2017. It wasn't until the fall of 2018 that we finally worked up the nerve to tell each other that we wanted more than just a friendship. Life is weird. It works out in odd ways. In the spring of 2018, he was looking for a roommate. My ex and I were broken up. I was looking for a roommate. So we moved in together and we're roommates. What's better than living with your best friend? We went on lots of adventures. Some of my best memories are on a camping trip to some national parks in Utah with him right before we started dating. When we came back from that trip, that's kind of when we both looked at each other and were like, yeah, we want more. We need more from this relationship. And it worked out great. And we got married in June of 2019.
Very good. Yeah. Well, you do have quite a story there, starting out as coworkers and moving to roommates before realizing that you love each other. So that's a fascinating and interesting little journey that you went on over the last couple of years.
Yes.
So what then made you leave for Jefferson County Sheriff's Office?
I was looking for something different to do. It was kind of becoming a routine at the Lakewood Police Department. I had various projects, but I was looking to move myself forward in my profession. There was a level system there at Lakewood, so kind of like a senior analyst with a junior analyst. I was in the junior analyst position, and I wanted more opportunities. I wanted to get involved in more projects and see what it was like to be a lead analyst or a solo analyst. So that's when I had the opportunity to move to the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. It has been a wild ride, but I have loved nearly every moment of it.
So, and then now you're stationed in the patrol division, whereas before you were more in the investigative division. So what was that jump like, moving from investigative division to a patrol division?
it's way more fast paced. Investigations in Frederick and in Lakewood, while they were quick, things happen relatively rapidly. In the patrol division, on the patrol side, what I do here at the sheriff's office, it's ever changing. Every day is a little bit of the same. Every day is very different. So basically, I focus on what's happening in the last 24 to 72 hours as the patrol analyst. And then I also have many different functions within the sheriff's office that fall into support services. So I say if it's not related to the jail or strictly investigations, it falls onto my lap. So I do patrol data, crime stats, I work with records, I work with IT quite a bit. I pull all data related to calls for service and crime for the whole department.
You're pulling all this data together, reviewing it, finding patterns and trends. I guess, what do you do with that information then? Is it, because it's just like 24 hours, do you guys have an overall goal in mind, or what's the purpose of what you're doing?
So primarily our focus is week to week and month to month. And then if there's hotspots or sprees or trends or patterns that pop up throughout the week, I will send out information. Kind of like an information hub for the department, if you will. If it happens in patrol, I want to make sure that investigators know of anything else that's going on the patrol side of things, what's going on in other jurisdictions. Weekly, I sent out numerous reports that go over calls for service, what kind of calls, where they're coming from. I'll do a crime review, what's happened in the last 7 days. We also focus a great deal of attention on domestic violence cases. So what kind of cases are coming in? How has coronavirus affected crime rates or calls for service? There's been a lot of discussion about that. And then on a monthly basis, we have a meeting called Sharper Smarter, and it's loosely based off of the CompStat approach with modifications that I have made over the last almost 3 years that I've been here, so that we understand what the data is saying overall. Previously, it was a very static approach to what happened the most recent month, over the last month before that, over the last 2 years. So for example, July's meeting, we will go over June crime data and May data for 2020. And then we'll compare those numbers to June and May of 2019. That's how they used to do it. Over the course of the last 3 years, like I've said, we've kind of changed our approach. We still look at those 4 months, but we also look at averages, standard deviation, ranges. In 2018, the Sheriff's Office had a record year, lots of calls for service, pretty much any and all crime type that you could commit increased. So that's why we started looking at the averages. We wanted to know if 2018 was truly an outlier year, or were we seeing this drastic increase that would increase from in the future. 2019, things slowed down a little bit. 2020, things have slowed down a lot of bit. But it's a great opportunity for patrol, investigations, support services, and the detentions division to get together on a monthly basis and compare notes.
And you run that meeting, is that correct?
That is correct.
And so how influential were you as they're reinventing itself, the meeting, to go beyond just looking at past records to getting more into statistics? And how was the buy-in for that, of transforming from just normal counts to now getting into stats and maybe more prediction?
So I love data. I love statistics. I'm always digging around in databases, poking around probably where I shouldn't belong in databases in regards to crime stats and calls for service. Thankfully, and it was a wonderful opportunity. My boss kind of said to me when I first came here, "You're the subject matter expert. What do you want to do? What do you think's best?" I was given an opportunity and an environment, which was vastly beneficial, to try different things out. So that's how we went from just looking at 4 months to looking at 4 months, 3 years, and 5 years worth of data. So having the flexibility and the platform to have that feedback from the different levels of command has encouraged and supported the shaping of this CompStat approach. I think it offers a better understanding of what's going on in the community, especially when you look at things seasonally. I hate to keep beating 2020 like a dead horse, but there's just been a lot of stuff that's gone on this year. So it's important that as a crime analyst moves forward within a department, that they're aware of what's gone on previously, like 2018, super high numbers. We had like 120 something criminal trespasses to vehicles in our South Precinct in August of 2018. That was just unheard of. So having that understanding of what's gone on historically helps to provide data in the future. A great opportunity that I've been given this year is I created a series of maps that showcase where calls for service are coming from in regards to fireworks complaints. They had a very different approach over the last several years, where they would just look at repeat addresses and they would deploy officers wherever they thought would be best. This year, I created hotspot maps and I was like, this is the area that you need to send people to. 6 years worth of data, you can hone in on neighborhoods that have increased or decreased. So working closely with patrol, and even more so as time has gone on, has allowed for my position to just continuously change.
So with the fireworks, were there areas that you saw a trend over 6 years, but maybe recently they hadn't been so hot? In that case, was there any pushback to say, okay, we don't need to worry about that, they recently haven't had a problem?
So it was the opposite. So they didn't really, as far as I can perceive, they didn't quite understand how the calls were clustering together. So if you have a neighborhood of 10 houses and 8 of those 10 houses are calling in to dispatch to complain about fireworks, they were only looking at the addresses themselves. So they would just see that address 6 had called once. Maybe address 8 had called 3 times. But when we put it on a map and I can show them like, okay, yeah, we've got repeat houses that are calling, that doesn't mean that that's the house that the offense is being committed at. And we're able to say, like last year, prior to the 4th of July, I said, we should probably look at this area. I feel like there's just a lot of calls for service. There's a lot of criminal activity. And they're like, yeah, okay. And then being able to say, okay, here's the data and here's the map that supports this. Stop sending officers into District 42, send them all to District 41 or South District 41. And it's like shooting fish in a barrel.
So just a quick question regarding back, you mentioned 2018. Was it the vehicle break-ins that you were talking about, record high for August?
Yes, that's correct.
Was that resolved because it was a part of a series? Was it part of one particular group or one particular person committing all of these break-ins, or how was that resolved?
So it was a combination of multiple things. We had several groups that would work one night and they would do 15 to 20 trespasses at a time. So that's how your numbers add up. You know, you could have 3 or 4 really active nights, but if 20 crimes are being committed that night, then you're going to see that increase. So it was a combination of different groups, crimes of opportunity. I have discovered that there are a large portion of the population does not lock their vehicle. So when you have people who commit crime, maybe they're juveniles, right? And they're hanging out with their older, cooler teenage friends. Well, if they figure out, the older teenage friends figure out the neighborhoods where people are leaving their cars unlocked, then those juveniles are going to know where to go to find those unlocked vehicles. And it's just like a snowball effect. That information gets shared. So the crimes of opportunity, the different groups working together had a huge impact. And then last year, I think we saw a decrease over the summer months, which is fantastic. I would like to believe that that decrease is due in part to data analysis that was done in our southern precinct or South Precinct over where the crimes had been occurring over the last 3 years. And then we said we identified an area where 25% of the trespasses were occurring. So we were able to deploy our resources to be in those areas during the identified days of the week, times of day.
So was there also a community campaign just to build awareness? You mentioned not locking your doors. Was it also something where you guys were putting out media information to lock your doors?
Yes, I work pretty closely with our crime prevention officer or deputy, and as well as our public information office. I've got great contacts in both of those positions, and we all work very well together. So I have great opportunity to just shoot a text or an email to the PIO or the crime prevention deputy and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. And then they can send out FYIs to the neighborhood associations. And what is also great is when a neighborhood is noticing something, but not necessarily reporting on it, the crime prevention deputy can come to me and say, hey, I've got citizens who live in this neighborhood who are saying that they're seeing an increase in A, B, or C. Then I can provide the data to support that or disprove that. So that open line of communication is fabulous.
Now, you mentioned COVID. How has COVID changed your job?
So it's done a couple of different things. I became more heavily involved in reviewing calls for service data, specifically calls related to COVID complaints, whether somebody has coronavirus and they're not following the social distancing, the calls coming in regards to people who were voicing concerns about people not social distancing. I spent many weeks and days reviewing calls for service data, trying to gather all of that information so we have accurate numbers. The downside is everybody you can ask a person to write a sentence and no two people are going to write the sentence the same way. Same thing exists within calls for service data. You've got people calling about social distancing. They're not following that stay at home order or the work from home order. So all of those different combinations of words is like a giant puzzle piece. So I've had to create programs that look for that. Coronavirus, when we went on a lockdown, if you will, situation, our calls for service numbers dropped significantly over week to week. So it averaged at the time, I think about maybe 1,200 citizen generated calls. And we went to like 3/3 of that, or not 3/3, 3/4 of that. Sorry.
Okay.
Need more coffee, apparently.
Yeah, it's still early in the morning. Go ahead.
So we used that data to better deploy our resources. For example, traffic units not necessarily have the opportunity to catch speeders or seatbelt violations, DUIs, because nobody's out and about, right? So crime kind of sort of decreased and then has kind of sort of increased. It's like a pendulum. It keeps swinging back and forth. We're definitely down overall this time last year. We have seen a correlation between, how do I want to say this? So we have we call them flags, if you will. We've got different flags for different things, mental health related, mental health referral, DUIs, maybe domestic violence, elder abuse, and so forth. Well, we created a new flag for coronavirus. So we have a new ability to track cases that are related to coronavirus, maybe marijuana complaints or juvenile complaints. So there was an ability to see the correlation between different crime types or flags, if you will, being committed together. There is some speculation that coronavirus and the lockdown and the social distancing may or may not have had an effect on domestic violence. I am curious to see moving forward to the rest of the year if we can continue a pattern in order to have a definite answer, but I don't know if we will anytime soon.
So during the lockdown, you mentioned that just overall there wasn't much crime going on, DUIs and shoplifting, so on and so forth. What was the strategy of the police department to redirect patrols, given that they didn't have to worry about speeders or DUIs as much?
Sure. I know our deputies were still responding to calls. We were not responding to certain types of calls, so we had more deputies taking phone calls, if you will. They were deployed in other ways. I don't know specifically deployment directives that were offered at the time, because, there was still crime being committed. So I can't speak on what they did in the meantime.
And then now that things are reopening, it's the summertime, more active, what is the response of the police department in terms of when you get the calls for service that somebody's not social distancing or not wearing a mask? Because that's probably considered a low-level call, for lack of better terminology.
There were numerous calls made and concerns made about people not social distancing. Now that things have loosened up slightly, although it sounds like they're being reined back in, the focus of the public is not necessarily on the social distancing. Right now, everyone, or more often than not, people are hyper-focused on fireworks complaints. Oh, okay. So we're seeing this sharp increase in fireworks complaints, but we don't know why. We have a fire ban in Jefferson County, and fireworks are pretty much illegal in all of the Denver metro area. But we've seen this increase in complaints. For example, the city of Lakewood has seen 3% increase in calls. The sheriff's office has seen a slight increase, but within the Denver metro area, all agencies were reporting this increase. And so the news decided to do a series of stories on the increase in fireworks. Well, when they did the story, we saw a sharp increase in fireworks complaints. So there's always these other factors that we have to be aware of on why we're seeing increases or decreases in calls or crime types. So with the coronavirus and the lessening of regulations and so forth, we are still seeing officers being deployed to prevent gatherings of people. We're shutting down one of our bigger parks, our open spaces this weekend, to prevent people from gathering and seeing fireworks that are being put on in one of the neighboring cities or properties. We initially decided that we were not going to be issuing summonses because you want to try to keep contact between people to a minimum. But then I heard that due to the complaints we were receiving and the concerns that citizens had about fireworks, there may be opportunities for us to write summonses this year. So the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office kind of functions in a way that truly does serve what the community wants.
So is the fireworks started earlier this year compared to other years?
I believe the data shows that fireworks complaints started in the beginning of June. The Sheriff's Office, unincorporated Jefferson County, did not necessarily see an increase in the fireworks complaints until the middle of June, tail end of June. And like I said, I believe it has a correlation between the stories that were done on the local media or the local news sources about the complaints. And that's when we saw an increase.
More awareness. Okay.
Yes, hyper awareness.
Okay. All right. So then do you have a favorite case that you've worked on so far in Jefferson County?
Given that I'm a patrol analyst, I don't necessarily have the opportunity to work on cases. I have projects that I've done.
Sure. Favorite project then?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I have a couple. So revamping our CompStat meetings has been a challenge, but one that I have thoroughly enjoyed because it's put me in a position where I have to be open to constructive criticism, but taking that constructive criticism has provided better products. I love that I get to work so closely with the data, with crime data, with calls for service information. I have enjoyed being able to provide maps that can prove or disprove a point or offer patrol deployment recommendations. I think one of the more fascinating things that I will be doing in the next couple of months is assisting in the data analysis for our new Senate bill that got passed in regards to gathering demographic information.
Okay,
so I'm on so it's called State Bill 117, and it requires each law enforcement agency to self-report various things. For example, one of the things that we're going to start gathering is demographics on traffic stops or demographics on pedestrian context. So when a deputy pulls over a vehicle, they'll attempt to gather perceived race and ethnicity of the individuals they're making contact with. And then they enter that data into a system, which then I can analyze and gather that data. We have to have everything set up, how we're going to mine all the data, what softwares we're going to use, and then we start reporting on everything in July of 2023, I believe.
Oh, wow. That's some time.
So we have a couple of years to figure everything out, but I know requests for information are going to start trickling in. So in the meantime, it's my job to see how our systems gather the data now and how we can get everything to talk to each other or not.
Sure, because you're going to have to go from the MDC in the car to your records management system and beyond.
Correct. We'll do our record management system. We will do our dispatching center, the computers in the car. There's also discussion about how our motorcycle deputies will be gathering the information because they don't have computers, so we need a cell phone app, right?
Oh, okay.
Well, what kind of cell phone application should we use? And I am very fortunate and thankful that I get to sit on this committee and tell or educate individuals on the limitations of what they want to see done and what can and can't be done.
Now, did you also have a problem-solving project that you wanted to talk about?
One of the projects that I've done is compare shape files within our mapping software. So I know a lot of analysts use ArcMap or other mapping software, and I know some analysts don't. I am fortunate enough that I can use Esri ArcMap. So when we went to our dispatching center, we were told that information could be gathered one way. We would use a filter where the jurisdiction was identified as Jefferson County. That was great. And I do a monthly report on traffic stops. Of the traffic stops, how many summonses were issued and how many warnings were issued. Well, once the dispatching center got all set up and running, I noticed based off of their recommendations, we saw a 50% decrease in traffic stops. And I could not figure out why we saw such a decrease in traffic stops when our traffic unit, who I work with, he said that they were busier than ever. So I went back through the data and I noticed that, in fact, we were not getting everything. And I was able to determine what was happening is the dispatching center had created polygons or shapefiles for the different jurisdictions, but they didn't necessarily match up with political boundaries. And so I had to go to my boss, to the department, to our dispatching center and say, your recommendation of using this filter is great, but it doesn't serve our purpose because it's cutting out data. You know, it's Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. We have jurisdiction everywhere within the county. But what it was doing is saying if a deputy stopped at an intersection and maybe that was within the city of Lakewood, it wasn't counting it as the Jeffco sheriff, it was counting it as a Lakewood. So we had to change how we gathered it. So we look now at the deputy identification number.
Oh, okay. It was cutting out a bunch of stuff on the borders with the new shape file and putting it on the other side of the border instead of with the sheriff's border.
Right.
I've been working as an analyst now for 6 years. Mm-hmm. And I was just looking for maybe some advice that you have for analysts maybe just getting started. Do you have any advice for them?
Never give up. There's always a way to solve a problem, and try your very best not to get discouraged.
And then Mindy put this question in there. She wants to know how you got buy-in from what she calls old school folks. I think she was being nice to me there. She usually calls them boomers. But
that's fine.
What have you found in terms of working with older staff members in your career so far?
I think an analyst should always have an open dialogue and avenue of communication between these old schools, if you will, mm-hmm. because they contain such valuable information that I will never learn in a textbook or ever be able to see electronically. So when I'm faced with opposition, my goal is always to try to get them to tell me their ideas, what has worked, what hasn't worked historically for them. That way, I'm not wasting my time reinventing the wheel So being able to create an opportunity for them to just come to me and tell me what they're looking for or what they're not looking for has allowed me to create products that they like, that they appreciate. I always encourage, if I'm working with somebody for the first time within the sheriff's office, or even time and time again, I ask them, tell me what you want to see. One aspect. Do you want to see the roads? Do you want to see the trees? I want you to tell me what you want to see out of this product. And everybody always has an opinion. It's amazing. They go from, well, I don't really know what I want, to, okay, well, I really would like this. And I can build off of that.
That's great. Well, let's take a break. When we come back, I want to get into some of your personal interests, camper, hiker, fisher stories. And we're also take your calls. We're introducing a new segment called Don't Be That Analyst. This is Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. We'll be right back.
Hi everyone, my name is Mindy and I am a writer for Analyst Talk with Jason Elder as well as a current crime analyst. My PSA for our listeners is don't compare your origin stories to others. I used to be super insecure when asked, why do you want to be an analyst or in law enforcement? And I always felt like I had imposter syndrome because I didn't have a good reason. I don't have any family members in law enforcement. I've never been involved in a crime, knock on wood. And I just felt like I had no good reason for being here besides just being interested in the industry. 6 years later, I still don't feel like I have a good answer, but I love my job and I'm pretty good at it. Passion or your calling isn't something that just hits you one day. It is something that's built and maintained over time, day by day, every day. If you're on the fence whether you're cut out for this field, just go for it. If you currently have no reason, make a reason. Make your own origin story. I believe in you.
Hi, this is Mitri Lewis, and I want to say, make friends with your other analysts. Don't just stay in your own little world, in your own little bubble, but hey, meet the other analysts who work in your jurisdiction, who work in your county, who work in the jurisdictions around you. Have lunch. Go play cards together. Do something together to get to know each other. It will benefit you in the long run.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking with Danielle, and she was talking to us about her current position, directing patrol and leading the ComStat style meeting for patrol for Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. I want to switch gears a little bit now and just get into a little bit of your personal interests, because you are a hiker, you are a camper and fisher, so that's a lot of what you've been doing recently. Talk a little bit about your outdoor activities and how you got into it.
So despite growing up in Oregon and it raining, 8 months out of the year, I was very active, always playing soccer or basketball or volleyball. When we weren't doing that, we were hiking or biking. So it's always been something that I've enjoyed. It's been a part of my life since I was a little kid. So here in Colorado, obviously, I'm a little biased. I think it's a beautiful state. There's so much to do here. I love to be outside, and we have 350 days of sunshine pretty much.
And low humidity.
Exactly. Thank God. Being that I have this interest already to be outside, I'm hiking, I'm walking my dogs all the time. My dogs love to explore. I soak up as much sunshine as I can. So there have been some hikes that we've done in and around the Denver area. Green Mountain is great, South Table Mountain, North Table Mountain. There are so many opportunities to go hiking up in the Rockies. There's great little towns like Buena Vista, Princeton Hot Springs, Princeton, even Twin Lakes. So being outside is what I love to do because I didn't get to do it all that much when I was a kid. So I run a lot with my dogs as well. I have a mini Aussie that just has so much energy that she pretty much wears me out whenever we go for a run. Like yesterday we went for one and she was wired last night right before bedtime. So I can't ever seem to make her tired.
How far are you running these days?
So I ran a 10K yesterday.
Okay.
And that's the most I've done with her in the last couple of weeks. I hurt my back at the beginning of the year and it took a long time to heal. So we're slowly starting to get back into it. And then my husband and I started fishing this year. We have had no luck catching fish, but that has not discouraged us from at least trying. I think we might go this weekend. The downside is we generally get up really early. I'm not necessarily a fan of that. But great to be outside with my husband, enjoying nature. One of the things that I cherish about it is that it's just the two of us. Sometimes I'm really talkative and I want to talk about everything under the sun. And other times it's just great to sit there and enjoy each other's company. And we've gone camping together twice now. We went a few weeks ago up in Twin Lakes, and I had a fabulous time. We didn't sleep very much. It got really cold. That's one thing that people forget about when they want to go camping up in the mountains, is that it's still pretty high up there. We were camping around 10,000 feet, and it still gets cold up there, even though it's the end of June.
Now, were there any COVID concerns, regulations at the campsite that you had to deal with?
Yeah, so none of the drinking fountains were open. Most places have like a well where you can go and get water. We had to bring it all in, which was fine. No big deal. Because we were camping in a national forest, generally they don't have shower facilities, so that wasn't an issue for us.
Sure.
And we only go camping a couple of nights, so we don't necessarily feel the need to shower. I mean, a night and a half or 2 nights and a day and a half, and you're just sitting around a campfire hanging out it's nice.
So do you have a bucket list in terms of where you want to hike and camp next?
Here in Colorado, I really want to go to Georgetown, Steamboat Springs, and Telluride. I heard a song as a kid about Telluride, and I was just like, I have to go there. So someday I want to go to those places. Other places that I would love to do some more hiking is out in Utah. They have amazing national parks out there, so I want to get to the ones I haven't been able to hike through. Arches, Bryce Canyon, Canyonlands, Capitol Reefs. I was able to do a very small hike because it was thunderstorming when we were through there, but it was beautiful. And then Zion. So anytime I can go through those places again would be fabulous.
And then what's the farthest hike that you've been on?
We did a 7-mile hike in Escalante, Utah, that led to this waterfall that was absolutely gorgeous. And that took a couple hours because it's along a riverbed, but it's all sand. And oh my gosh, I was so tired. There's nothing like walking 7 miles in dry sand.
Yeah. Oh, man. Well, you got me wanting to go hiking now, and I am going camping with my kids here in the next couple of weeks. So now you got me yearning to go camping and hiking and all that good stuff. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go to the next segment. This is a new segment that we're trying out. It's called Don't Be That Analyst. And it's a caller segment in which callers call in and describe a situation where you don't want to be that analyst. And my example for don't be that analyst is don't be that analyst that publishes an Excel spreadsheet with 27 tabs and none of them are renamed. Kind of not best practices per se. We had talked about this before. Did you have a don't be that analyst that you had in mind that you wanted to share?
Don't be that analyst that gets stuck and doesn't ask for help.
So I have some callers on the line, and what I want you to do is listen to them, and okay. I'll let you be judge. Tell me which one you think is the best. Does that sound good?
Okay.
So the first caller is Stacy. Stacy, what is your don't be that analyst?
Don't be that analyst that's the hoarder of information, who's not willing to share information about the trends and patterns and cases in your jurisdiction.
Oh, yeah. So you deal with silo databases. You definitely don't want to deal with silo people. All right. Now, Tony, you're next. What's don't be that analyst?
Don't be that analyst that is always too busy to help.
Yes, I always think and strongly believe that every analyst should be available for any analyst, even if it's just for 30 seconds. We are our biggest resources, and it's important that we keep our networking and communication open.
Let's move on to Steve. Steve, what's your don't be that analyst?
Don't be that analyst that always plays it safe and never takes a risk.
Yeah, Daniel, you were just talking about that, right? Put yourself out there a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. Then, Mitri, what's don't be that analyst?
Don't be that analyst who gets stuck. Don't let them pigeonhole you. Don't let them relegate you to just one task or a couple of tasks. Always be willing to learn and explore and grow as an analyst.
Yeah, find a way. Look to do more than what is asked of you and be willing to learn new techniques and just find a need, fill a need. And then we got one more. Mike, what's don't be that analyst?
Okay, don't be that analyst that sends those letter bombing size files. PDF them, compress them, do something to make them a little bit smaller so you're not totally bogging down everybody else's mailbox.
Yes, think of the email like fast food, short, sweet, and delicious.
Okay, very good. All right, Danielle, which one did you like the best?
I really felt a connection with the one that encouraged you not to get pigeonholed. I think that after a certain point, analysts get a little tired of putting themselves out there and trying to make change. And if you let yourself get too discouraged, you get stuck in a rut. And you're too dang smart to settle.
Yes, I think everybody gets a little complacent after a while. And that's why I actually think it's really important to do annual reviews and annual training and do a pause on your career and think about your goals and where you want to go. And to get past some of that complacency, or if you're in a rut, or if you're in a bad situation, focus on a goal of getting out of it. I leave everybody with the last segment, which is Words to the World. You can talk about whatever you want to. You can promote any idea that you want to. Danielle, what are your words to the world?
My words to the world: be kind to one another, be considerate, and be respectful, and never, ever drink and drive.
Very good. Well, I tell every guest that you've given me just enough to talk bad about you later, but I do appreciate your time today, and thank you so much for being on the show, and you be safe.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you for joining us today on Analyst Talk with Jason Alder. We hope you not only enjoyed the show, but also learned something new. For more information on our guests and information relating to today's topic, please visit our website at leapodcast.com. Special thanks to the Rough and Tumble for our theme song. For more of their music, you can visit their website at theroughandtumble.com. Also thanks to Kyle McMullen for our show logo. For more of his design, please visit his website at moderntype.com. The show is hosted, recorded, and edited by Jason Elder and written by me, Mindy. You can contact us both via the LEA Podcast website. Please join us again next time as we interview another expert in this great field.